Have you ever noticed how two perfectly decent people can completely ruin what was supposed to be a great evening? Today, we're talking about one of the most common relationship habits that quietly poisons connection, creates resentment, and leaves both people wondering why they're suddenly irritated with each other. And the funniest part? Most of the time, neither person is trying to start a fight. In fact, both people usually want exactly the same thing. They want peace, to relax after a long day. Yet somehow one simple sentence can turn a pleasant evening into tension, passive-aggressive silence, or a full-blown argument. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you're sitting on the couch. You're finally done with work. You're watching TV, scrolling through your phone, whatever. Suddenly, you look at the kitchen and think, you know what? I should probably do those dishes. You're ready. You've already made the decision. You're going to get up in 30 seconds and take care of it. But then your partner walks into the room and says, "Hey, can you do the dishes?" And suddenly, something happens inside your body. Your motivation disappears, not decreases, disappears. 5 seconds ago, you were literally about to do it. Now you would rather go for a walk in a storm than touch that sponge. Why? Because the task didn't change. The dishes didn't change. The amount of effort didn't change. The only thing that changed is ownership. A moment ago, it was your decision. Now it feels like somebody else's decision. In some cases, it may even feel like an order. And this tiny shift activates something very powerful inside many people. Psychologists call it reactance. Reactance is what happens when the brain perceives a threat to freedom. Human beings are wired to protect autonomy. We want to feel that we are choosing our actions. We want to feel that we have agency. The moment somebody appears to take that away, the nervous system pushes back. Not because the task is difficult, not because we're lazy, because our brain interprets pressure as a loss of control. Now, before somebody writes in the comments that people should just grow up and wash the dishes, stay with me. Because this goes much deeper than dishes. This is about relationships. This is about why good people trigger each other every single day without understanding what's happening underneath. Many people who react strongly to pressure didn't learn that pattern in adulthood. They learned it in childhood. Imagine growing up in a home where every request was actually a criticism. Clean your room. Why is your room always a mess? Do your homework. Why are you so lazy? Help your mother. Why do I always have to ask? Over time, the nervous system stops hearing requests. It starts hearing judgment. It starts hearing pressure. It starts hearing control. And the brain begins creating associations. Request equals danger. Request equals loss of freedom and emotional discomfort. Then the child grows up. The adult looks perfectly normal. They pay taxes, they have jobs, they have relationships. But deep inside, their nervous system is still responding to old programming. If you are interested, go ahead and watch my recent video on how to let go of programming. This is why some people can calmly do a task if they choose it themselves, but immediately resist when somebody else tells them to do exactly the same thing. The task isn't the problem. The loss of autonomy is the problem. Now, here's where I think men and women often misunderstand each other. Women tend to be incredibly sensitive to emotional atmosphere. Women notice tone, timing, facial expressions, small changes in behavior. Men, generally speaking, are often much more task-oriented. Not always, but often. So a woman may spend an entire evening thinking about how something was said, while the man is thinking, the garbage needed to go out. I took it out. Problem solved. He genuinely doesn't understand why she's upset. She genuinely doesn't understand why he's irritated. And both people think the other one is being difficult. Meanwhile, neither of them sees the actual problem. The problem is not the garbage. The problem is not the dishes. The problem is that both nervous systems are feeling disrespected in different ways. One person feels controlled, the other feels unsupported. One feels criticized, the other feels unappreciated. And suddenly you're arguing about a trash bag while the real issue never gets discussed. This is one reason I always tell women to stop overanalyzing every tiny behavior and start looking at systems. Healthy relationships are built on systems, not mind reading. The happiest couples I've seen don't spend their lives negotiating every fork, every dish, every load of laundry. They know each other's preferences, each other's strengths and limitations. I'll give you an example. I absolutely hate taking out the trash. Will I do it if I have to? Of course, I'm an adult. But if you ask me what household task I would happily remove from my life forever, it's taking out the trash. My garbage cans are far away. If it's raining, forget it. I'm definitely not going. On the other hand, I hate waking up in the morning and seeing a full trash bag in the kitchen. I also despise seeing dirty dishes in the sink. This is how I was raised, shamed for every chore I couldn't complete properly. So now we have an interesting situation. I don't like taking out the trash, but I also don't like looking at it. My partner knows this about me, and I know things about him. That's the difference between a power struggle and a partnership. In a power struggle, people argue about who should do what. In a partnership, people learn each other's preferences and build a system around them. A lot of couples spend years fighting over chores when the real issue isn't the chores at all. It's that nobody has taken the time to understand how the other person's brain works. One person hates laundry. Another person hates grocery shopping. One person would rather cook every day than clean a bathroom. Another person would gladly clean the bathroom if they never had to cook again. The goal isn't to make life equally miserable for both people. The goal is to make life easier for both people. Healthy relationships are not built on keeping score. They're built on cooperation. They're built on understanding that different people have different nervous systems, different preferences, different strengths, and different annoyances. And when two people stop trying to win and start trying to solve problems together, something amazing happens. The arguments disappear. Not because the chores disappear, but because the resentment disappears. Because we're building a life together. If I cook, the people I feed usually clean the kitchen. If my husband cooks, I clean. If we cook together, we clean together. And here's something funny. I love cleaning floors. My partner doesn't. I can put on a podcast and happily clean for an hour. He would rather do almost anything else. So when he decided he wanted me spending more time with him and less time cleaning, he bought robot vacuums. Because he understood my preference and found a solution. That's what healthy relationships actually look like. Not keeping score. Not proving who's right. Not trying to win every negotiation. It's understanding each other's psychology well enough to create a system where both people can thrive. And yes, I know this next part will make some people angry. But fairness is not always 50-50. If one person is working 60 or 70 hours a week and bringing home nearly all the income, I personally don't think it's fair to expect them to come home and immediately start a second full-time job in the house. On the other hand, if both partners work the same hours and contribute similarly financially, expecting one person to carry all the domestic responsibilities is equally unfair. Healthy relationships are not built on equality, they are built on perceived fairness. And fairness looks different in every family. The question isn't who does more. The question is whether both people feel respected. Because once respect disappears, every request starts feeling like a demand. Every suggestion sounds like criticism. Every conversation becomes a power struggle. And here's the really interesting neuroscience behind all of this. The human brain is constantly scanning for status, autonomy, belonging, and fairness. Thousands of years ago, these things determined survival. Today, they determine relationship satisfaction. When somebody feels their autonomy is threatened, the brain activates defensive responses. When somebody feels unseen or unappreciated, the brain activates defensive responses. In both cases, connection becomes harder because the nervous system shifts from cooperation into self-protection. Imagine your romance tonight if this happened. That's why the solution is not forcing people to obey. The solution is creating an environment where people willingly participate. Because people are surprisingly generous when they feel respected. People are surprisingly helpful when they don't feel controlled. People are surprisingly loving when they don't feel judged. So the next time you find yourself getting irritated over something small, pause for a moment and ask yourself a different question. What is actually happening underneath this interaction? Is this really about dishes? Is this really about garbage or laundry? Or is somebody feeling controlled, criticized, ignored, dismissed, or unappreciated? Because once you identify the real issue, the argument usually becomes much easier to solve. And that's a very different kind of love. This was always yours, Katara Lilith, and I will see you next week.